Hey everybody, welcome to Learning MongoDB second edition. This course is called Learning MongoDB Deployments, and I'm your instructor, Michael Shallop. There I am. How you doing? I started programming back in 1981 when dinosaurs were still making the earth tremble, and over the course of my career, I've had several positions, both technical and non-technical. I've been a classroom instructor for subjects such as programming languages, operating systems, and database theory. And I've also been a programmer. As a matter of fact, the last 7 or 8 years, I've been working on writing a custom backend framework for web applications to provide a database agnostic interface for front-end developers, meaning they can make requests of my framework without needing to know the schema of the database that their data is stored in. I know enough DevOps to be officially classified as dangerous, and I'm going to be taking you through this journey, learning MongoDB, and hopefully showing you why MongoDB is such a great tool and how it's so flexible you can use it in pretty much any environment. So without further ado, let's take a look at, the course overview. And we've broken down the course into 4 sections, and each of those 4 sections is a different topic. And it's all at the introductory level, so I don't want you to get too overwhelmed by it. In the first section, we're going to talk about installing MongoDB into various environments. And to be able to install MongoDB into these various environments, we have to define what these environments are. So I'll be giving you a real-world view of these environments, and they range from production to QA to development. And we're going to walk you through a couple of installations of the MongoDB product. We're going to be using MongoDB 3.2 version. And we're going to first install on Ubuntu 16.04, and then we're going to install on AWS Linux. So once you have your database installed on Linux, we're going to jump into the second section, and we're going to work on configuring your database so that it becomes useful to you. So we're going to show you how to configure MongoDB as a standalone service. In other words, if you're a developer and you're working on your laptop, we're going to show you how to install MongoDB as a replication set, which is basically 3 separate MongoDB installations working together to replicate your data for data surety. And we'll talk about that. And then finally, we're going to tackle the big kahuna of database, the sharded cluster. And I'm going to walk you through how to create, configure, and install a MongoDB sharded cluster. In the third section, we're going to get into some administrative work with Mongo. I'm going to show you how to create MongoDB user accounts at both the administrative and the database level. Now, users were not enabled by default until version 3.6. And like I said, we're in version 3.2. So this information is very important, as 3.2 is one of the more popular releases still in use today. In regards to security, we'll also briefly touch on data encryption and why it's so critically important nowadays. And we're going to talk about encryption for data both at motion and at rest. And then finally, we're going to end up in the 4th section of the course, and that's the best practices section. And this is where I get to talk about deploying Mongo into various environments that you'll encounter in your career, and tips and tricks on how to maximize resources within your environment. For example, in my lab here, for this course, I set up a sharded MongoDB cluster, which would normally take a minimum, if you have 2 shards in your cluster, would normally take a minimum of 10 nodes, 10 different computers. And I'm going to show you how to do that using only 4. And then finally, we'll wrap up the best practices section with a brief introduction to some administrative best practices, especially for database backup and recovery. So as you can see, we have a really full agenda. You may be asking yourself, did I make the right decision? Should I even be in this class? What do I need to know? And the answer is pretty easy. You should have some decent DevOps skills. In other words, you should be comfortable with the command line, because most of our work is going to be done at the command line level. As a matter of fact, we're working with Ubuntu 16.04 long-term support version of Linux because it is the most popular flavor of Linux that's currently out there. So if you want to follow along exactly with the course, that's the version of the operating system we're using for everything. And as a matter of fact, the version I'm installing is the server edition and not the desktop edition. So it doesn't even have a graphical environment installed, just straight command line stuff. Hopefully you're familiar with other database schemas, and by other schemas, I'm talking about SQL. SQL is a programming language for accessing databases. It's accessing relational databases. It encompasses database like MySQL, MariaDB, Postgres, Oracle, and several others. MongoDB, as you'll find out, is schema-less, so the main distinction between Mongo and these other database schemas is basically Mongo doesn't require a predefined schema, and again, we'll talk about that, what a schema is later in the class, whereas the SQL-based databases are a little bit more rigid and have a lot more rules on data representation. Don't worry, don't be intimidated. I'll explain everything to you every step of the way along we go, and by the time we finish the course, you'll be able to install, configure, and use MongoDB on your own installations in the environment of your choice. So without further ado, let's go to the next video. We're going to start with installing Mongo Database. And again, thank you for taking the course. I'll see you in the next video.